Welcome to Being Authentic AF. I'm Alexis Franzese, a university professor, licensed psychologist, speaker, consultant, and mom with over 20 years of experience studying authenticity. This podcast explores what authenticity means and how to embrace it in your life and relationships. It's for anyone seeking to better understand their own authenticity and how it shapes our connections with others, from kids to colleagues. Through reflections and conversations with entrepreneurs, we'll share strategies to uncover who you authentically are and want to be. Life's curveballs are opportunities to grow, adapt, and uncover or rediscover your authentic self. Join me as we explore how to know yourself, be yourself, and evolve yourself, unlocking the path to truly being authentic AF. Welcome to Being Authentic AF. I'm here today with Dr. Mira Brancu, counseling and coaching psychologist. She has a company called Towerscope that focuses on leadership, identity development, and supporting high-performance teams. Mira is an associate professor at Duke, the author of the Millennials Guide to Workplace Politics and accompanying workbook. She is a Psychology Today columnist, and she hosts the Hard Skills podcast. I met Mira about 15 years ago when we were both on the North Carolina Psychological Association's Colleague Assistance Committee, a committee charged with supporting psychologists and thinking about self-care. And I'm so happy to be here with you today, Mira, and to have a conversation about authenticity. So welcome, and thank you for being here.
I'm excited to be here with you.
Okay, so we are going to get right into it.
All right.
First question, when in your life did you feel the most authentic?
We're going to get right into the deep stuff already, huh? I would say it was when there were multiple moments, but I think the biggest moment, and this is going to sound kind of strange, was I had reached a certain level in my leadership career where I finally felt like I didn't need to cover up all of who I was. And that's how this crazy haircut started. I just completely shaved it, and it felt like, yes, I can finally be my sort of quirky, feisty, a little edgy kind of self, and other people can actually see it visibly.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. When was that? How many years ago would you say?
I would say that was probably, about 10 years ago.
Okay. So you were pretty established in your career path when you had that confidence and felt like you could do that.
Yeah. I would say another time before that was when I went away to college, and, I found kind of a group of people, and, unlike high school where you still have to sort of put on some airs or people are very judgy or whatever, I think it was like the transition between 11th, 12th grade in high school, and then especially in college where I was not with my family anymore. My parents weren't overseeing everything. And it's not like I was that different. I just felt maybe a little bit freer.
Right. And have you ever had people comment to you that they notice that they notice you being yourself and that it affects them?
I think my closest friends have always known who I was. So I don't think they necessarily recognize that much of a difference as much as I felt kind of a sort of feeling of freedom or liberation in some way. I'm trying to think about if anybody ever made a comment about that. I think when, for example, like when I started transitioning into like this hairstyle and stuff, it was a slow transition. I was testing the waters. I was like, can I go this short? Can I go like this? That kind of thing. And so maybe it was too gradual, not enough of a like massive shift for people to think there was that much of a difference.
Sure. That makes sense. I think we do what we can when it feels like the right timing. And I think the questions of timing around authenticity are really interesting. So research by psychologist Susan Harder shows that this idea of authenticity starts to become relevant in early adolescence. So middle school, not surprising, I'm sure, around age 11, adolescents have this awareness of kind of true self and false self behavior. Does that timing ring true for you?
It's a really good question, because at that time, so let's say, 10, 11 was 5th, 6th grade. I was still living in New York City at that time. I was living in an area, I'm an immigrant, and I was living in an area where it was like at least 60 to 70% immigrants. So all of us had this kind of part self that was trying to fit into the American culture, and part self that was like who we are as, from our country. And I think that alone made it easier to be authentic in some ways, because we were all very different. There wasn't like the one way. I would say when I transitioned to Long Island in New York, and you and I are from New York, so you're very familiar with this. At that point, there were, almost no immigrants. People were much more sort of homogenous in how they acted, how they grew up. The language was the same, that kind of thing. And that was when I was 12, 13. And that was really, really hard. I really felt like I could not be myself in those situations. And it took a really long time for me to to find my people, and to find my voice and to find myself. And so that took maybe a longer period of time than maybe somebody without that same background, or who had lived in the same area with the same people for a long period of time.
Right. Do you feel, having moved to the U.S., that there was messaging in your family, or did your parents talk about staying true to your country of origin? Was that a thing?
It was not a thing for us. We were trying to fit in. So the messaging was more about like, learn the language, be successful, try to do anything you can to succeed in this country. So that was a lot more about acculturation, and adaptation than anything else. And I think that probably makes me who I am today as part of my authentic self, is the adaptation, resilience, scrappiness, resourcefulness stuff. But that does mean that I had to let go for a long time, part of who I was. The other thing about it was in Romania, we were Jewish. Less than 1% of Romanians are Jewish. And most of those people also worked for the Communist Party, which is a very unusual situation. And so that means that we were very secular. And when we moved to the US, I told my dad once, I'm not Jewish because I don't believe in the religion. And he said, you don't have a choice. You are Jewish regardless, because it's both a race and a culture. So it was like, that was a sort of interesting moment when I realized that you can't just like separate out some part of you just because it doesn't ring true, or because, there's some sort of external definition. Like, just being able to understand that part of your identity was a very interesting experience.
That is. And I wonder, in listening to that, when people are raised with their families holding certain identities that don't ring true to them, what do you think makes it possible to change that? Like, if an identity really doesn't feel aligned for somebody?
That's a really hard question. Because I knew I was going to be on this podcast, I walked around the block with my husband talking about authenticity and his views and my views and all of that stuff. And I'm not sure I have an exact answer for you around this, but I, did sort of struggle with the question of, so I'm very interested in leadership identity development, and that's part of, development as a person, and how, it's hard to be your authentic self with all of the messaging that you receive, especially if you're from a marginalized background, right? And so, some of the stuff behind the question is like, if you're from the LGBTQ community, right? If you, are a Black woman working in a predominantly white male, culture, or company, right? And having to navigate trying to fit in order to be accepted, and then getting to a point where maybe you've been accepted to a certain point, and then trying to go to the next level in your career, and all of a sudden being told all of those things that you work so hard to be accepted as and like to fit in are no longer acceptable, and you have to be somebody different again. Like the amount of work you have to do to learn to fit in and then unlearn because it's damaging is fascinating to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that, that you created Towerscope and support leaders in thinking about these really big questions. Okay. So I want to ask you about starting Towerscope, and was authenticity at stake in your decision to start your business?
You mean for myself?
Yeah, for you and starting it.
Yeah. That's a really great question. I think part of it was more pragmatic, practical, like I needed a backup plan just in case my current career plans were not going to work out. But the other part of it was really digging deep about what makes me happy, what I enjoy doing. And my realization was I really loved supporting women who were navigating the same things I had navigated in my leadership career, and how they came to me asking me, how do you navigate this complex culture and politics and, become visible for the work and, the things that you do. And that is all about me, I often say research is me search, and, what we do for profession is part of who we are. So, when I was starting the company, the other really hard thing was I wanted people to start knowing who I was. Part of business development is know, like, and trust. People need to know you. They need to like you. They need to trust you to believe in the work that you do and to invest in you. And putting myself out there on the internet and sharing about myself and speaking about my experiences to help people understand who I was and what I was bringing to it was very, very difficult. And when you're talking about things that you think are normal to you, like women navigating leadership, but aren't necessarily always accepted by others, I was very surprised at some of the backlash or trolling that I was getting even in 2018 around this stuff. Yeah. And that was constantly causing me to question myself. Is this the right move? Am I doing the right thing? Can I handle this? Am I brave enough? Like, there's a lot of inner sort of questioning. As I was developing my business, I was developing myself as well.
Yeah. Wow, Mira, that's awesome. And when I think about the timing of things, the hair change, you said, was about a decade prior. So that actually came before Towerscope, which leads me to believe you kind of had come to terms with some things within yourself before you took that plunge. And it sounds like that people have recognized that in you, and people were coming to you asking for advice about kind of how to navigate these transitions. And you in part created Towerscope in response to that people were approaching you about this. What do you feel like has been the biggest challenge to your authenticity as an entrepreneur?
It is the online presence. It is, even in 2018, you can see the trolling behaviors happening, and you could see when you talk about, I talk about inclusive leadership. I talked about, sort of gender equity and things like that. And every time I would get backlash or questioning or, harassment and things like that, I would go into this kind of like 2-week spiral of like, I don't think I can handle this anymore. I don't think I could do this. I don't think I have the voice for this. And there was also kind of like evaluation of like, what is actually my voice online? And am I an advocate? Am I a supporter? Am I a champion? Am I an ally? Like, what am I? And that is both in person and online, but like that in and of itself was a question of, how am I coming across, and is it authentic to me to do this or to say it in this way or whatever. And I think it always goes back to my, early experiences of being judged as a child, and that led to social anxiety, fear of being, negatively judged, harshly judged, that kind of thing. And constantly still to this day, I'm, 40 something years old and just having to find my sort of courage to seek out, like, where is my comfort level with this and where is my need to just self-protect or I don't feel like I have to be my whole self online. People don't get access to my full self unless they build trust, and there's a lot of people I don't know out there. They don't have, they haven't built a trusting relationship with me. So I'm also like very clear about, like, authenticity is not necessarily about you having access to everything about me. It's about, like, me just being able to feel comfortable with who I am and be aligned with the things that are important to me.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for that. So when I think about authenticity, I think about it as kind of a process that we cycle through in our lives where we kind of need to know who we are, like really check in with who we are, then be that person in the world, and then be open to the fact that is evolving and changing kind of, through the chapters of our lives. What are the practices you do or engage in to kind of know yourself and to kind of check in with yourself?
Well, one of the things I think is when I get harsh feedback, I have to really just stop and look hard at myself, and I've gotten, feedback that was not accurate and off, but I still stopped. And what I do is, I try to get a lot of information from other people. Like, does this sound like me? This is the exact thing that happened. What do you think? Is there something that, that led to me creating the situation or whatever? So part of it is actually just trying to be honest with myself and take the feedback. The other is trying really hard when the feedback is not accurate to remind myself, like, how did I come to that conclusion, right? There's a constant sort of self-assessment about the alignment between what are my values, what's important to me, is that coming out, am I falsely representing myself in some way, all of these things. And then being okay sometimes with the other person being wrong and that maybe they didn't see who I was fully, and that's just an outcome of being human and miscommunication, misunderstandings too.
Absolutely.
What's your process? I'm curious.
I try to check in with myself regularly about, am I living in values aligned ways? And I feel like you have to get really raw in that process sometimes, because I think not only are there parts of ourselves that we feel protective of and want to shield from others, I think we actually sometimes don't look openly and honestly at all the aspects of ourselves, maybe because there's parts that we're a little scared to see.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of really raw self-assessment is necessary. I think there is a great opportunity in looking at the feedback for others. I think sometimes people see things that we don't quite see. I love that Johari instrument. I don't know if you're familiar with that, as a way to learn about the ways people might perceive us that we don't see in ourselves. As a therapist, I'm a big believer in therapy and think that the process of being in therapy helps us to stay values aligned in our actions. And from time to time, if we choose to not be values aligned, to be intentional and honest with ourselves about why we are not doing that in that moment. I also think there's great value in reflecting on changes through chapters of life. The things that felt authentic for me at earlier ages are shifting now. Ways of being in the world that felt totally aligned are shifting.
Yeah.
And being open to that. So, I loved hearing about your process, and I'm excited on this podcast to actually hear about how other people navigate this as well. So thank you for sharing a bit about your own process. And I want to ask you now about how, as a business owner, how do you uphold the authenticity of others? Or create space for them to be authentic?
Like of my clients?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that is the crux of everything that I do. And I don't call it authenticity necessarily, though I think it does touch on exactly that. But it's basically when people come to me, it's usually during some kind of transition, decision making, navigating a really highly uncertain time, complexity. And I can give them all the advice, that I can offer, but if it doesn't fit how they work, it's not going to work, and it's going to feel awful, and it's going to feel bad or off or whatever. And so a lot of it is using assessments to help me and them understand, what is it about them and how they work and their preferences and their style and their interests and their motivations, the things that they feel motivating, rewarding, the things that are their, what we call derailers or risk factors when we're under a lot of stress, and then using that to create a plan that is much more natural. And I'm a huge fan of, you can be successful and reach the same exact, level of success in lots and lots of different ways. But if it feels really unnatural, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to lose energy. You're not going to, you're not going to feel like it's right for you. And so, even when we're doing like super specific tactical stuff, like how do I give feedback to my, employee about this thing that was upsetting me, and I say, well, if you were a much more direct person, you might say this: you don't strike me as a direct person. We looked at your assessment. You're much more about like team building, harmonizing, peacekeeping. So it's going to feel like you're white knuckling it if you're going to give feedback in a way that's exceptionally direct without the feeling in the relationship. So here are different ways to give feedback in a way that feels so natural that it's going to actually feel like you're creating greater connection instead of separation. So it's even stuff at that level that is all about helping people find a way to align authentically with who they really are, to bring out their very best, and to catch themselves when they're not sort of aligned or figuring out that they're doing things that are very de-energizing for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we think about authenticity in really similar ways, and living in values-aligned ways. And I love hearing the ways you support people in doing that. So I'm wondering about other hacks or tricks you might have to keep yourself or others on course for authenticity.
Well, I did mention assessments. So that's a big one for me. And especially if you could do a 360 degree, assessment for audience members who don't know, it's basically asking for feedback like I do, with people who are, employees or direct reports or mentees of yours, people who are peers, people who are mentors, people who are supervisors, superiors, everyone around you, so that you can get a full picture of how you might come across, maybe your reputation, whether your reputation, is different than your intent or, your impact. So that's one. How else do I, figure out how to stay aligned? I think, every time there's some kind of conflict, I really just pay attention. Every time I feel irritable, annoyed, snappy, like strong emotional reactions, that's when I need to attend. Why did I have that reaction? What does that mean? Has it gone longer than this one situation? If so, am I in like a longer term situation? I need to determine what to do with this. Or is it just like that one person in this one situation? All of these things, it's just a lot of attending to my inner reactions, and then trying to figure out and stop and like not let it go, not dismiss it, not overlook it, not be defensive, but just curious.
Absolutely. Curiosity feels like it's the fix for so many things.
Yes.
And certainly this. Okay, switching gears a little bit. I want to ask you about places, like geographical places where you might feel more authentic, where authenticity feels more in reach for you.
That's a really interesting question. I guess, many people would say at home. When you're at home, you're in the safest place for most, not everybody. But, for me, being at home, I'm in a safe place. I think, less maybe geographically, but like with people that I have full trust with, I feel like I could be myself. And I'm trying to think geographically. I mean, there's places I feel comfortable, but is it authentic? I think that's different. Mm-hmm. How about you? Do you have a geographic authentic place?
I was thinking about this a lot recently in terms of environments where I used to feel a sense of authenticity and don't anymore. Just kind of been being out in the world with my family. We went to an indoor water park a few months ago, and I remember being in that environment and feeling like I totally belong there. And of course, there's some nuance between sense of authenticity and belonging. But I feel like the two concepts are certainly related. And when we were in this water park, there was a time when I would look around the water park and think like, this place was made for us. Like they thought of everything. And when we were there most recently, as my kids have gotten older, it didn't feel the same. I felt sort of silly being in that environment that we had outgrown. It didn't resonate in the same way. So that's a little bit of what I had in mind there. And then I do think there's environments and spaces that are facilitated to give us a sense of belonging in them. And I think that can contribute to, there's this reciprocal relationship between authenticity and belonging.
Yeah. Well, I bet I was suspecting you might say Disney World because, I mean, she has a whole course on Disney World, but that's a place that's made to sort of try to bring out the things that some people really just value and find, a sense of place and space. For me, I think it's with people, certain people. And, when we talk about authenticity, I also wanted to sort of mention that all of us are multifaceted, right? There's parts of me that are super silly and into dancing and, being kind of geeky, awkward. There's parts of me that are super focused, high achiever, intense. There's, other parts of me that are advocate, fierce, outspoken, and I'm not those same people with certain people. Different people bring out different parts of me, and I can feel authentic in very different ways with different people, and they might bring something else out of me that I'm not able to bring out for myself with somebody else. So I think there's also that piece too.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, and it makes me think about conversation on code switching. And whether or not code switching is authentic or inauthentic behavior. And I would argue that code switching can actually be part of somebody's authentic self, in that if they are presenting themselves in the way that feels true, genuine, values aligned in a certain setting, that is authentic, that we, can choose to present ourselves in different ways that are all genuine, that are in alignment with what that environment is demanding of us and appropriate to that setting. Yeah. What do you think about that?
That is super interesting. I'm no expert, but I want you to get an expert in this seat about code switching, and I will watch.
Yeah, we'll have to have a whole episode on code switching and authenticity.
That sounds great.
So I want to ask you in the last few minutes that we have on this episode today to think about some of your kind of authenticity heroes or models. These can be people, that maybe no one listening knows, but, someone in your more personal life, or somebody out in the world that we might all know. Who are some of your models, though?
Yeah. I think I would put them in two different buckets of types of people. So there's the folks like Pink and Chappell Roan who are in the sort of fiercely outspoken, unapologetically who they are in all spaces. You can see that. You can tell it. You can hear it when they're doing interviews. I really look up to people who can do that, who are not afraid to be judged for exactly who they are and in fact, like, embrace it. But then the other bucket, I would put like Fred Rogers and Dolly Parton and people who are like quietly, courageously kind, I would say. Like they are always in the face of like some, you know, ugly, nasty, bad politics, you know, trolling, like in response to that, they're still kind. They're still giving. They're still embracing humanity. And they do it in a way that it just inspires you to be a better person. And I want to be both. Like I look up to both types.
Yeah, and I would argue that both of those kind of aspirational models could be authentic aspirational models for someone.
How about you?
Oh, wow.
Putting you on the spot.
Oh, goodness. You know, I need to give that some good thought since I ask it as a question.
Yeah.
Myself, but when I first got into this research, it was inspired by this E.E. Cummings quotation: "To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle any human being will fight and to never stop fighting."
Oh, I love it.
That inspired
me.
And recognizing that as true actually connects to my last question for you. Do you think that, well, it's twofold. Do you think we have an ethical responsibility to be authentic? And do you think authenticity is a form of privilege?
Ooh, these are hard questions. Maybe I'll start with the second. Is it a privilege? I do think it is. Yes. I think that most of the people who I've worked with who come from, backgrounds that have traditionally been marginalized, minoritized, racialized, they have had to work really hard to be accepted in a world that is constantly judging them. And I feel like it's really hard to be, quote unquote, authentic, like your fully true self in that kind of situation. It is a privilege. Now, the first question about, do we have like an ethical responsibility? I think I'm gonna say this. I think we have an ethical responsibility to make it more comfortable for everybody to be their authentic selves.
And I'll add to that. I've been asked over the years if I think that everybody should be authentic all the time. And I always give a resounding no to that. I am a big proponent of pro-social authenticity. So I would say that authenticity that harms or oppresses others, let's just merge that. Yes. Pro-social authenticity, I think is for the win. So,
I'll embrace that.
So thank you for being here and talking about authenticity with me today. Listeners, you can learn more about Mira's work with Towerscope at her website, which I'll have in the show notes, and hope you have some new things to think about as a result of today's session.
Great to be on the show.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Being Authentic AF. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our series wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep being Authentic AF and let that authenticity uplift and inspire others. Take care.